That evening at the family dinner table, my daughter-in-law leaned in close and whispered into my ear, "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you ridiculous old hag." I laughed a clear, ringing laugh that echoed through the room. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I said. 3 weeks later, I gave her a surprise gift, and she shattered. My name is Helen Whitaker, 66 years old. I've spent almost my entire life in our old English-style house in a quiet suburb. My husband Raymond and I had been together for 44 years. Mornings with coffee and the paper afternoons trimming roses together, the kind of silence that spoke volumes between two people who knew every breath of each other. I thought I knew everything about Raymond, about our son Evan, and the life we had so carefully built. I was wrong. That Tuesday evening, the house felt warm and cozy. The chandelier above the dining room cast a soft golden glow over the walnut table that had stood for over half a century. I brought out the pot roast with vegetables, Evan's childhood favorite, my mother's vintage china, the crystal glasses from our 20th anniversary. Everything was perfect. Evan sat carving the meat as if it were a mission of utmost importance. His slightly curly black hair fell over his forehead, just like when he was a boy. Raymond sat at the head of the table, buttoned-up shirt neat, his usually warm blue eyes now fixed solely on his plate. Throughout dinner he avoided my gaze, something he hadn't done in months. Vanessa, Evan's wife, sat across from me. Her blonde hair was neatly tied, and her green eyes sparkled like emeralds. She was 14 years younger than Evan. From the first time she stepped into our home, I'd sensed a predatory glint in her eyes. She didn't just look, she examined, she assessed. And that night she wore triumph like a perfume. She kept placing her hand over her still flat belly as if beckoning attention. Evan, oblivious, beamed with joy, chatting enthusiastically. But I could feel a warning bell tolling deep inside me. Something was coming. "Mother Helen is just wonderful," Vanessa said sweetly, her voice dripping with sugar, but there was a sting to it only I could detect. A devoted wife, a model mother, truly inspiring. I nodded and replied, "Thank you, dear." But a chill ran down my spine. "Lately, I've been thinking a lot about wedding vows," she continued. "In sickness and in health for richer or poorer." Raymond clenched his fork. The metallic scrape against the plate sounded like a blade. Evan clasped her hand and smiled. "Marriage is a commitment," she said, "a shared future." Vanessa smiled, but her eyes never left mine. "Or, sometimes, it's about sharing what others have already built." My heart pounded. I couldn't tell if it was from rage or foreboding. Then she stood up, smoothed her dress, and smiled. "I have wonderful news. It will change our whole family." Evan sprang to his feet, eyes glowing. "I'm pregnant!" The room fell silent. Evan was overjoyed, wrapping her in his arms. "That's amazing, Mom, Dad. You're going to be grandparents. I should have been elated, even moved to tears." But I wasn't. A cold dread crept through my body when I saw Vanessa's eyes not looking at her husband, but at mine. She smiled victorious. "Congratulations," I said, my voice unfamiliar even to myself. Evan went to pour wine for a toast. Vanessa walked slowly around the table, stopping beside my chair, bending down as if to hug me. But instead of hugging, she whispered into my ear, "The baby is your husband's, you fool." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Still, I smiled a cold, sharp smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I replied. "Everything will be just fine." Vanessa froze. She clearly hadn't expected that. She wanted me to cry, to scream, to ruin the evening. But I chose a different weapon: composure. I looked at Raymond. He still couldn't bring himself to meet my eyes. In his expression, I saw something had died, perhaps my trust, or something even more fragile, respect. We finished dinner as if nothing had happened. I smiled, accepted compliments, played the part of the happy mother-in-law. But inside, I knew a storm was forming. That night as they were leaving, Vanessa looked back at me as if she had won. I stood silently in the kitchen, surrounded by dishes, the yellow light casting shadows on familiar walls. Raymond walked in behind me. "Helen, Not tonight," I said without turning. I couldn't. Not today. Maybe never again. I stood there alone. Inside me, the wife I had been was gone, but another woman, stronger, more resolute, was beginning to awaken. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the large bed Raymond and I had shared for 44 years, listening to each steady breath he took beside me, wondering the man I had called my husband for nearly half a century, was he really who I thought he was? Every small sound in the night, the groaning of the settling house, the wind whistling through the window frame, even the hum of the refrigerator echoed like a knock against my heart. The next morning I woke up early, just like always. I brewed coffee, fried 2 soft-boiled eggs, toasted 2 slices of whole-grain bread, and cut them diagonally just the way Raymond liked. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The early sunlight streamed through the window, lighting up his face, the face I once adored, now strangely unfamiliar. "Sleep well?" he asked, eyes never leaving the newspaper. Yes, I lied. We ate in silence, not the comfortable kind we used to share, but a tense, uneasy stillness. When he folded his paper and stood up, he said, "I'm going out to the garden today. The rose beds need trimming before the first frost." The garden. That familiar phrase he'd said it countless times in the past few months. I watched his back as he walked outside. His shoulders were more hunched than last year, his hair grayer, but he was still the man who once made my heart flutter at a church banquet 45 years ago. But today, I wasn't sure I truly knew who he was anymore. I sat alone in the kitchen, sipping coffee gone cold, letting my mind wander through scattered memories. I replayed every moment from the past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. They were there, as clear as puzzle pieces lying around that I had chosen not to connect. 3 months ago, Raymond started showering at odd hours, not just in the morning like usual, but sometimes after gardening or before dinner, even when we weren't going anywhere. I asked, and he said, "Didn't want fertilizer smell lingering during dinner." 2 months ago, I happened to see his credit card statement. Strange charges, a flower shop in the next town, a jewelry store I'd never heard of. I asked, and he chuckled. Birthday surprise. My birthday was still 4 months away, but I chose to believe him. 6 weeks ago, Vanessa started visiting more often, always during the day, while Evan was at work. She claimed she was learning to cook, asking about family recipes, about being a wife. She stayed a long time, and every time I walked into the room, I found her and Raymond in the middle of a conversation. As soon as I entered, they stopped. "Just talking about flowers," Raymond said. "Vanessa wants to learn how to grow roses." But Vanessa never liked dirt. She once complained, "One speck of mud makes me feel like I'm back in the Stone Age." The morning after that fateful dinner, the phone rang. Mom, Evan chirped. "Did you sleep well last night?" I still can't believe it. Vanessa's already making lists. Baby names, nursery themes, everything. I fought to keep my voice steady. "That's wonderful, honey. Looks like I'll have a lot to prepare for." "Oh," Evan continued. Vanessa said Dad seemed really emotional when she told him. She said he was the first to know, like a whole week before. She was worried you wouldn't take it well since we're still young. My hand tightened around the phone. A week before. She had told Raymond a whole week before telling the rest of us. Why tell my husband before her own? I hung up. The pieces started fitting together. Raymond avoiding my eyes. Vanessa's triumphant glances at him. I was beginning to understand. I needed the truth. But I couldn't ask Raymond. If I was wrong, I could destroy my marriage with suspicion. But if I was right, I got up and began cleaning, folding each placemat, wiping an already spotless table, as if wiping away the tangle of thoughts in my mind. Through the kitchen window, I saw Raymond trimming the roses, the same careful movements, the same focused look. Beside him was Tony, our gardener for over a year. Tony was around 36 or 37, with gentle brown eyes and calloused hands from honest labor. He lived in the small apartment behind Mrs. Martinez's house, across the street tending gardens for several families in the neighborhood. Raymond had hired him after our previous gardener retired. I liked Tony, quiet, polite, dedicated. But today, as I looked at him, I started to wonder, did he know? Had he seen something? Did the whole neighborhood know what was going on in my house? Before I did. Around noon, Vanessa's familiar silver sedan pulled into the driveway. She stepped out her soft maxi dress, swaying in the breeze, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. She walked straight into the garden where Raymond stood. I pulled back behind the curtain and watched. They talked for quite a while. She laughed, tossing her head back a laugh so polished it seemed fake. Raymond laughed too, his eyes lighting up with an emotion I hadn't seen in a long time. They spoke for about 20 minutes. Then Vanessa glanced toward the house. I jumped back, heart pounding like a thief caught red-handed, in her own home. When I peeked again, she was gone. Raymond continued gardening, but his movements seemed lighter, more relaxed. That evening, Raymond was unusually cheerful. He talked about spring, about planting more lavender, about becoming a grandfather. I hadn't seen him this enthusiastic in weeks. I sat across from him quietly observing. His eyes held no guilt, not the look of a man who had betrayed his wife, but the look of a man. "Liberated, Vanessa stopped by today," I said, testing his reaction. Raymond nodded, cutting a piece of pork. "She's anxious. First-time mothers often are. I was just calming her down. Anxious about what?" His hand paused. "Oh, about becoming a mom, health stuff. The usual things." But Vanessa was never one for usual worries. That night, after he fell asleep, I made a decision. I couldn't live in doubt any longer. I couldn't look at my husband each day and wonder, is this the truth? Or a calculated lie I needed to know, no matter the cost. Tomorrow morning, I would start investigating and I would uncover the truth, even if it hurt. On Wednesday morning, Raymond left the house at 9 a.m., saying he had his routine doctor's appointment. I knew the schedule he had gone every month like clockwork. But today, as the sound of his car engine faded behind the line of trees, I didn't return to the kitchen like usual. Instead, I walked upstairs and stopped in front of the door that had always been the most sacred space in Raymond's life, his study. That room had always been off-limits to me. I respected his privacy, never once stepped inside without an invitation. But things were different now. My hand trembled slightly as I grasped the brass doorknob. The door creaked softly as it opened. The space inside smelled faintly of aftershave and old books, the scent of a man I once believed was everything. I stepped in, feeling like an intruder inside my own home. Everything was overly tidy. Not a single scrap of paper out of place on the desk. The leather chair positioned precisely to catch the morning light. Bookshelves meticulously organized: history, philosophy, gardening, finance. I started with the top drawer. Fountain pens, paper clips, a few business cards from a cardiologist and a contractor. Nothing suspicious. The second drawer held correspondence and bills, all familiar. But in the bottom drawer, bottom right, I lifted a stack of gardening magazines and found a thick pile of printed papers. I pulled it out: bank statements, not for our shared account, but for a private one under Raymond's name. I skimmed the pages. Large deposits: $6,000, $8,000, $14,000, regularly transferred into the account. Then withdrawals, all in cash, all in neat round amounts: $3,000, $4,000, $7,000. Where had the money come from? And where had it gone? My hands shook as I snapped photos of each page with my phone. It took me 3 tries to get a clear image. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I returned everything to its place, closed the drawer, and shut the door. But inside, I knew I was still missing something much bigger. The sound of a car in the driveway startled me. I rushed to the window. It wasn't Raymond's car, but Vanessa's familiar silver sedan. She stepped out wearing tight jeans and a fitted sweater that highlighted her slim waist, clearly emphasizing that she was pregnant. But this time, she didn't come through the front door. She walked around the back toward the garden. I quietly went downstairs, entered the kitchen, and hid behind the curtain at the window. Vanessa walked straight to Tony. He was sweeping leaves under the old oak tree. They spoke, standing quite close. Tony looked uneasy while Vanessa, as always, commanded the conversation. I couldn't hear them, but their body language said it all. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope, handing it to Tony. He glanced around, then quickly stuffed it into his jacket pocket. Money. It couldn't be anything else. She had just paid the gardener. But why all household expenses were managed by Raymond? Why was Vanessa paying Tony privately? I barely had time to process before another engine rumbled. Evan. I saw my son step out of his blue SUV, smiling and waving at his wife. Vanessa immediately walked away from Tony and hurried toward Evan, her voice bright. Surprise. I was planning to kidnap you for lunch. I was just about to call you. Evan hugged her, spinning her around like a movie scene. Off to see Marcus. Just asked a few things about the garden. Vanessa replied quickly. Since the baby, I want to learn more about plants. Perfect answer. Perfect lie. I stood behind the door, masking my face as they came inside. Mom Evan beamed. Guess who's plotting to plant an entire lavender garden outside the baby's room? Vanessa smiled. Her smile scraped like a spoon against ceramic. I just want to create a green space for the baby. Sounds great, I said. Tony's very knowledgeable. Yes, Vanessa replied, her eyes locking onto mine. He's very perceptive. The way she emphasized perceptive made my skin crawl. Was she sending me a message? Was there something hidden behind that polished exterior? Lunch passed with idle chatter about baby names, paint colors, strollers, and high chairs. Evan was full of hope. Vanessa, though she said less, kept glancing toward the window, toward the garden where Tony was still working. She was worried. She was trying to control something, and I was starting to think Tony knew more than he let on. After the couple left, I stood by the window again. Tony was still working, but I noticed him glancing repeatedly toward the house, the road, his truck, as if bracing for something difficult. Raymond returned close to 6 p.m. That evening, he barely touched his food, just picked at it and pushed the plate aside. I asked, "Is something wrong?" "No, just thinking about roses." "No." He was thinking about something else. I could tell. His brow furrowed, his eyes distant. The phone rang while I was cleaning up. Raymond answered. I watched from a distance. His face turned pale as he listened. "Yes, I understand. I'll be there tomorrow night." He hung up, standing still. "Who was that?" I asked. "Doesn't matter," he replied, voice faint. "I've got something tomorrow night. I'll be going out for a bit." "Tomorrow night? Going out after dark?" Raymond had never been the type to go out at night, especially alone. The next evening I said nothing, but when he drove away at 7:30 p.m., I knew what I had to do. Just 20 minutes later, I heard voices in the backyard. I turned off the kitchen lights and crept to the back window. In the dim light, I saw Vanessa standing with Tony near the shed. They were arguing. Tony kept motioning his objections. Vanessa had her arms crossed, her expression tight. Then Tony raised his hands, turned, and walked away. Vanessa grabbed his sleeve, trying to pull him back. They exchanged a few more words before Tony firmly pulled away, shook his head, and walked to his truck. He drove off. Vanessa stood there alone in my garden. Under the yard light, she no longer looked like a sweet young wife, but a dangerous woman, calculating and desperate. A cold breeze swept across my back. I knew the moment of confrontation was drawing near. Raymond returned home just before 9 p.m. He didn't say a word. He didn't go into the kitchen. He didn't look at me. He walked straight into his study and shut the door. Then came the sound of a phone call, quiet rushed. I couldn't make out the words, but his voice was tense. I lay still in our bedroom, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The pieces kept spinning in my head, the secret account, the envelope of cash, Vanessa's eyes when she looked at Tony Raymond's odd bathing habits, the ill-timed reassurances. This wasn't just an affair. Something deeper, darker was unfolding. And I knew tomorrow I would do something I'd never imagined. I would search my son's room. Friday morning was overcast and drizzling, just like my mood. Raymond left early, saying he needed to pick up a few things from the gardening supply store. But those stores didn't open at 7 a.m. I didn't question him. I didn't need another lie. As soon as he pulled out of the driveway, I headed upstairs into Evan's old room, now converted into a guest room after he moved out. Pale green walls, pristine white closet, everything tidy. Yet traces of Vanessa remained, a silk scarf draped over the mirror, expensive skincare products, neatly stacked fashion magazines. I began with the closet. The top shelves held nothing unusual, but in the bottom drawer beneath a stack of sweaters, my hand touched something firm, a yellow file envelope. I pulled it out. Inside was a bundle of financial documents that made my blood freeze. Bank statements under Evan's name with large cash withdrawals for no clear purpose. $18,000, $24,000, $30,000. Attached were applications for credit cards, personal loans, and a handwritten list looping and neat clearly, Vanessa's handwriting, Northwestern Mutual, $45,000, Chase credit line, $30,000 personal loan, T. Delgado, $20,000 emergency fund, $14,000. My hands trembled as I photographed each document, trying to keep the camera steady. Every page felt like a blade to the heart. My son, the sweet boy I once raised, was drowning in debt, and Vanessa knew. She was using it. The front door closing startled me. I quickly returned everything and hurried downstairs. Vanessa walked in, holding the house key like it belonged to her. "I hope you don't mind me letting myself in," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "It's fine," I replied, trying to sound calm. "Would you like some coffee?" "That would be lovely." I prepared the coffee while Vanessa sat at the kitchen table like she owned the place. When I returned, her eyes studied me as if trying to read my thoughts. "You look tired," she observed. "Is everything all right?" "Just a little insomnia," I said, handing her the cup. "Pregnancy can make people anxious, can't it?" "Yes," she nodded. "And finances, too. When we're young, we make decisions we think are right, but they can lead to trouble." She looked at me, and this time there was no pretense in her gaze. It was an unspoken confession. "What kinds of decisions?" I asked. Vanessa gave a cold laugh. "The kind that require understanding from family and discretion." I swallowed hard. "Cedric has been very helpful," she said, still staring at me. "A good father-in-law, very good, always protecting his daughter-in-law, even at the cost of his honor." The room spun around me. Before I could answer, we heard voices from the backyard. We both turned to the window. Raymond was standing with Tony, the two of them locked in heated argument. Tony shook his head repeatedly while Raymond gestured, pleading. Vanessa shot to her feet. "I need to talk to them," she said quickly, heading outside. I followed close enough to hear. Tony was shaking, his face pale. "I can't keep doing this," he said. "Evan doesn't deserve this. He's a good man." "We had an agreement," Vanessa said coldly. "What agreement?" I cut in, my voice sharp as ice. All three turned to face me. Tony looked panicked. Raymond stunned, and Vanessa furious at the interruption. Helen Raymond stammered, "You shouldn't be out here." "Why not? It's my yard after all." I looked at each of them. 3 faces, 3 truths, guilt, rage, and pain. Tony spoke softly. "Mrs. Whitaker, there are things you need to know." "Enough," Vanessa snapped. "We had an agreement." "What agreement?" I asked again. Tony turned to Raymond. "Tell her. She deserves the truth." Raymond closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of sorrow. "Helen, I didn't have an affair. I never touched Vanessa. My legs nearly gave out." "Then why?" "Because of Evan." He choked. "I couldn't let him be destroyed by mistakes. I thought I could carry the burden for him. Vanessa, she found out about the debt. She has recordings documents. She threatened to expose Evan unless I pretended to be involved with her, as a cover, for the baby." I turned to Vanessa. "The baby. It's not Evan's, is it?" Silence. Then Tony spoke. "It's mine," he said quietly. "We made a mistake, just once." The world crumbled. Every lie, every scheme came crashing down like a tidal wave. Vanessa smirked, almost mocking. "So now you know everything. The question is, what will you do about it?" I didn't answer. I only knew one thing: I needed time. I needed to think. I needed a plan. But I had seen enough, and I would not let anyone destroy my family ever again. The confrontation in the garden felt like being hit by a truck. I went back into the house, sat on the living room sofa, didn't turn on the lights, didn't turn on anything. It was just me, the sound of rain falling on the porch roof, and the shattered fragments of memory spinning through my head. My son Evan was in over $120,000 of gambling debt. My husband Raymond had been blackmailed by our daughter-in-law, forced to pretend to have an affair in order to keep the secret. And Vanessa, the woman who once sat in this kitchen calling me Mom, was pregnant with the gardener's child. What was I supposed to do now? For the next 3 days, I lived like a ghost in my own home. Raymond and I moved around each other like shadows. He tried to explain, approaching me several times with pleading eyes, but I just raised my hand. "Not now," I said. "I need time to think," and I truly did. I thought about Evan, how I once taught him to be decent, to keep his word, to believe in fairness. Yet now he had fallen into a whirlpool of debt, ashamed to the point of letting his father carry the weight of an affair to protect him. I thought about Raymond, the man I had trusted absolutely. He had hidden it from me quietly, played the role of a betrayer to save our son. I couldn't entirely blame him, but the crack inside me remained. And Vanessa. I thought of her fake smile, her defiant gaze, her coldness as she used an unborn child as leverage. And I thought of Tony, the young man with sad eyes, the one who had refused to continue the charade, the one who, in a strange way, might have been the most honest of them all. The next day, I went out to the garden where Tony usually worked. He wasn't there. I checked the shed. Empty. That afternoon, I found a small piece of paper wedged under the lavender pot on the back steps. It was Tony's handwriting, scrawled and uneven. "I'm sorry. I never thought it would come to this. I've decided to leave. Going back home. I don't have the strength to stay and look you in the eye. I hope one day you'll forgive me. Tony." I wasn't angry. On the contrary, I felt pity. Maybe Tony was a victim too, like the rest of us. And perhaps of everyone caught in this tragedy, he was the only one who had the courage to stop before it was too late. The following Tuesday, I heard water running from the second-floor guest bathroom. My heart sank. I knew Vanessa was here again. I waited until she left the room, then went to check. Everything was spotless, as she always kept it. No trace left behind. Except this time, there was. A very important trace. Behind the toilet, I found a long, slightly crumpled white envelope. I opened it. Inside was a letterhead from Gene Tech Laboratories, a DNA test result conducted just 3 days ago. My hands trembled as I read the cold printed lines, Mother Vanessa Grant Whitaker, child unborn via amniocentesis. Alleged father 1. Evan Whitaker. Excluded paternity probability 0%. Alleged father 2. Tony Delgado. Not excluded paternity probability 99.8%. I collapsed onto the toilet lid, paper still in hand, my heart pounding like a war drum. This was the proof. Irrefutable. No speculation, no guessing, no more maybes or what-ifs. Vanessa knew. She had gone out of her way to get the test. But why? Why keep such undeniable proof if she intended to continue pretending the baby was Evan's? Then it hit me. She needed insurance, a final weapon to hold over Raymond, to threaten our family. If things unraveled, she could flip the story, accuse Raymond of coercion, claim he forced her to lie, and turn herself into the victim. I heard footsteps on the stairs. I stuffed the paper into my coat pocket, stood up and pretended to be checking the faucet. Aunt Helen Vanessa stood in the doorway. "I didn't know you were up here." "Just checking the pipes," I said, looking at her through the mirror. "Old house prone to leaks." "Right?" She nodded. "I think I might have dropped something earlier. Did you see anything?" My hand brushed the pocket. The test was still there. I looked her straight in the eyes. Didn't see a thing. Vanessa was silent, but I saw the suspicion in her eyes. She wasn't sure. "You feeling okay?" I asked. "Being pregnant and all." "You're kind," she replied. "I've been tired, but we've got the ultrasound next week. Evan's coming with me. He's so excited." I clenched my fist inside my pocket. Evan, preparing to be a father, to a child that wasn't his. I couldn't stay silent much longer. "Vanessa," I said gently, "is there nothing you'd like to tell me?" A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, but then she smiled that same old smile. "Truth is relative, Aunt Helen. There's what happens, and there's what people believe happened. Sometimes what people believe matters more than what's true." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I think I may have lost something. If you find it, would you let me know?" I nodded. "Of course." After she left, I pulled the paper from my pocket and sat on the bed. My hands no longer trembled. I had the proof, but the decision was mine what to do with it. If I gave it to Evan now, it might break his heart. His trust, his pride, the future he was trying to build could all collapse. If I exposed everything, Tony would be dragged into it too, the only one who'd shown enough conscience to walk away. I looked out the window where morning light fell over the rose garden. Raymond was trimming the bushes slow and careful, as if trying to fix something far bigger than broken stems. I sighed. The truth would have to come to light, but I would be the one to choose when. And I knew that moment was coming soon. That evening, after a late dinner for just the two of us, I walked to the threshold of Raymond's study. He sat motionless, eyes fixed on a stack of papers, though clearly he wasn't reading a word. The warm desk lamp cast a soft light over his silver hair and weary eyes. I knocked gently on the doorframe. He looked up. His eyes no longer held the guarded distance they had in recent days, only sorrow and expectation. "Can we talk?" I asked. Raymond nodded, gesturing toward the chair across from him. I sat down, pulled the envelope from my coat pocket, and placed it on the polished wooden desk between us. He stared at it without blinking. Then he slowly picked it up, hands trembling as he opened it and read. His face turned pale. When he looked up, his voice was hoarse. Where did you find this? Vanessa dropped it in the upstairs bathroom 3 days ago. Raymond gently laid the paper back on the desk, his hands clasped together, his chest rising and falling as though trying to suppress something he'd been holding in for months. "I can explain," he said. "No need," I replied. "I know you didn't sleep with her. I know she blackmailed you. I know Evan is drowning in debt. And I know you were only trying to save our son." Raymond's eyes widened as if he couldn't believe I knew everything. "Tony told me, then Vanessa confirmed the rest." He lifted his hand to his face. A moment later, I saw tears slip through his fingers. It had been over 20 years since I last saw my husband cry. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "We've been together 44 years. You thought I would turn my back on our son. I didn't want you to see him the way you saw your father," Raymond whispered. I froze. My father, a gambling addict, lost our house to baseball betting when I was 16. My mother collapsed, and I hated him for years. Raymond knew that, and he was afraid I would see Evan the same way. "I thought I could fix it," he said. "Thought I could pay it off, clean up the mess before you ever found out. But then Vanessa discovered everything, and she played her game." I glanced down at the DNA test, and the child is Tony's. "She planned it from the start," Raymond said. "Used? Evan used me. And now she's preparing paperwork to protect herself in case she's exposed." "Not very smart," I said, lifting the corner of the document, getting the test, and then dropping it. Raymond let out a teary laugh for the first time in weeks, a sound of relief, as if he'd just been pardoned. "What do we do now?" he asked. I stood smoothing my dress. "We'll invite them to dinner. This Sunday, Evan and Vanessa." Raymond frowned. "Helen." "Not to retaliate," I said, "to bring it to an end." That night, I began my plan. For the next 3 days, I played the perfect housewife, the kind Vanessa would never suspect. I called Evan's sweetheart. "I think we should have a family dinner to welcome the baby. I want everything to feel warm and loving." Evan was overjoyed on the phone, "Mom. Thank you. Vanessa's been worried you're still upset. This will really put her at ease." I nodded, even though no one could see me. Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen before sunrise. I simmered a pot of beef bourguignon, Evan's childhood favorite. I baked 2 loaves of garlic butter bread, and for dessert, my mother's heirloom apple pie. I polished the white porcelain dish set carefully preserved for 44 years. Raymond helped wipe down the table, arrange flowers, and set the chairs. We didn't need many words. Every gesture was a silent agreement. It was time to reclaim the truth. Sunday afternoon, when Vanessa entered, she wore a flowing maxi dress that hugged her belly, her hand resting gently beneath her waist, like a doting mother. "Aunt Helen," she said, kissing my cheek. "You've gone through so much trouble. The house smells wonderful." "We're family, dear," I replied, leading her to the dining table. Evan beamed as he pulled out her chair. "Mom is always the #1 chef." Vanessa looked at me, her eyes scanning the details of the table as if trying to sense what awaited her. But I simply smiled. We chatted about Evan's work, about what it feels like to be a mom, the sleepless nights, the gentle kicks in her belly. Vanessa responded smoothly. Every sentence sounded rehearsed. When the main course was served, I poured wine for Raymond and myself. Lately, I said casually, "I've been thinking about genetics, how we pass down traits and temperament." Vanessa froze mid-slice of her bread. "Genetics?" "Yes." Evan got his dark eyes from his father, but that stubborn chin, "all me." I smiled. "I wonder if the baby will have brown or blonde hair, be tall or short." "Hard to predict," Vanessa said quickly. "Genes are always full of surprises, but nowadays there are advanced tests." I continued sipping my wine. "Like prenatal DNA tests, they can confirm paternity with near certainty." The table fell silent. Evan glanced around confused. You mean like those ancestry kits on TV? Similar but far more accurate. Helps determine who the father of a child is, for instance. Vanessa went rigid. Her breath shortened. Her eyes darted around as if searching for an exit. I stood up, walked to the side cabinet, and pulled out a manila envelope, the DNA results. Dear Vanessa, I said, placing the envelope before her, I believe you dropped this in the bathroom last week. Evan's eyes bounced between me and Vanessa. What's this? Don't, Vanessa gasped. But Evan had already picked it up, opened it, and read. I saw his expression shift from confusion to devastation. His lips trembled. Tony Delgado. Who's Tony Delgado? Raymond whispered. Our former gardener son. Evan looked at his wife, searching for an explanation. But Vanessa remained silent, her head bowed. The child isn't yours, Evan, I said gently, and it never was. The room fell into silence, and that was only the beginning. No one spoke for several minutes after Evan finished reading the DNA test. My son, the boy who truly believed he was about to become a father, sat frozen still, holding the paper that proved the child wasn't his. I watched as Evan's eyes broke right in front of me, as if the entire world he had worked so hard to build collapsed in just a few lines of cold printed text. I don't understand, Evan said softly, his voice sounding like it came from miles away. Tony, Marcus, Delgado, who is that? Our former gardener. Raymond answered, voice steady but heavy. You met him many times. He left just over a week ago. Evan turned to Vanessa, his face pleading. Vanessa, say something. Vanessa lowered her head, lips pressed tightly together. She knew she had been cornered. The mask she had worn so carefully for months was now useless. I looked at her, and the rage I once felt had dissolved into something else, weariness. She was a woman who had chosen deception over asking for help, control over love. I'm sorry, Vanessa finally whispered, her voice unsteady. I didn't mean for it to... You didn't mean for it. Evan snapped, his eyes bloodshot. You planned this. You knew you were pregnant by someone else and still let me believe it was mine. When were you going to tell me? After we'd been married 20 years. I was scared, Vanessa said. I knew if you found out the truth, it would all be over. I had nothing. No one. And you thought lying was the way to keep me. Evan slammed his hand on the table. What about framing my father, making everyone believe he slept with you? You thought that would make things better. Vanessa looked at Raymond, then at me. She was desperate, searching for an escape. You don't understand, she stammered. I didn't want it to be this way. But when things got out of control, You what? Evan shot back. Threatened to accuse my father if he didn't stay quiet. Lied to my mother so you could keep living in this house, eating her food, sleeping in my bed, looking us in the eyes, like nothing was wrong. Raymond finally spoke slowly. Evan, I'm sorry. I was wrong not to tell you sooner. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I let you believe it was my mistake, you wouldn't be hurt even more. Evan looked at his father, his expression a mix of anger and gratitude. Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Raymond said, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. We'll get through this, as long as we don't let more lies destroy us. I turned to Vanessa, who now sat like a wax figure, silent, stiff. Her hands clutched her belly instinctively. What about Marcus? Tony, Evan asked, voice tight. Does he know he's the father? Yes, I answered. And he's left town. Left a note of apology and refused to be part of this any further. Vanessa nodded faintly. He didn't know at first, she said softly. It was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. I was lonely and confused. But by the time I found out I was pregnant, it was too late. and instead of telling the truth, I said coldly, "You spun a story about my husband seducing his daughter-in-law, blackmailed him using Evan's debt, and quietly prepared documents to shift the blame if you were caught." Vanessa didn't argue. She knew all her exits were blocked. Evan stood gripping the test results, eyes locked on her. "I loved you, Vanessa. I really thought we were going to have a family. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed the trust of everyone in this room." "I know," Vanessa murmured. "I was wrong. But what about the baby?" I stepped forward gently but firmly. "You'll still be a mother, but not in this house, and not as my son's wife." Raymond nodded. "We called Tony's sister in Phoenix. She's agreed to take you in during the pregnancy. A new place, a fresh start, far from what you've done here." "Phoenix." Vanessa blinked. I don't know anyone there." "She's not perfect," I said, "but at least she's willing to help a pregnant woman without asking for anything in return. And more importantly, she doesn't know anyone here." Evan no longer looked at Vanessa. He turned to me. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, my son," I said, holding his hand. "You're not a failure. You were taken advantage of. And realizing that is the first step toward standing back up." That night, Vanessa packed her things. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't shift blame. Perhaps deep down she knew she had gone too far. Evan helped load her luggage into the car. I stood at the door watching them beneath the porch light. "I know I can't make Evan come back." Vanessa said, her eyes moist. "But thank you for not completely destroying me." "I didn't need to destroy you," I replied. "You did that yourself. I just took back control of my family." She said nothing more. Then the car slowly rolled down the driveway. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no victory here, only truth raw and bitter. But at the very least, we had begun to peel back the web spun by deceit. And that was a beginning. The night Vanessa left, I sat alone in the armchair in the living room, a cup of cold tea in my hand, the dim light casting my shadow onto the wall, where our old wedding photo still hung in silence. I didn't feel the relief I thought I would, not because I pitied her, but because I knew that after all the lies, pain, and betrayal, someone else would suffer the most, Evan. The next morning as I came downstairs to prepare breakfast, Evan was already there, hair tousled, eyes red, but with a clarity in his gaze that hadn't been there before. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "No, you have nothing to apologize for. I let myself be manipulated. I was so blind I didn't see. It was all a lie. Not because you were foolish, Evan," I said, "but because you have a good heart, and because you believed in the person you loved." Raymond walked in holding the morning paper but not opening it. He set it on the table and sat beside Evan. "Son," he said, his voice low and steady, "I want you to know I was never disappointed in you. Everything I did, even pretending to be the one at fault, was because I didn't want to see you lose hope." Evan looked at his father, tears silently falling. "I've started going to Gamblers Anonymous," he said, as if confessing a secret. "I've been to 3 meetings. It's not easy. But I know I have to change." I sat across from him, my heart heavy yet strangely lighter. "I'm proud of you. Facing it is the hardest part." After that morning, everything in our house began to change slowly, piece by piece. The heavy silences were replaced by honest conversations. The midnight calls from creditors gradually stopped making room for therapy sessions and financial planning. Raymond and I also began to rediscover the closeness we once had, not through romantic words or grand gestures, but through small, meaningful acts, pruning bushes together, washing dishes side by side, sharing quiet smiles at the end of the day. And then a letter arrived, an envelope from Phoenix written in a soft, familiar hand. I opened it. Inside was a phone photo, a newborn baby boy with deep brown eyes and soft, curly black hair, unmistakable. Tony's child, and in an unofficial way, my grandchild. On the back of the photo were a few handwritten lines. His name is David. Thank you for giving him the chance to be born with dignity. Vanessa. I sat quietly for a long time, baby David's picture resting in my hands. I didn't know what his future would be, or whether Vanessa had truly changed. But I knew one thing: I had chosen kindness over vengeance, and that choice might have made a difference in at least one small life. 8 months after that fateful dinner, another child was born, this time my biological grandchild. Evan married Emily, a simple young woman who worked at the town library. No drama, no schemes, just a warm soul, patient and non-judgmental. Their wedding was held quietly at the old church on the corner, the same one where Raymond and I had exchanged vows over 40 years ago. I stood beside my husband, holding his hand, watching our son smile in a way he hadn't in months. When their baby was born, a little girl with jet black eyes like her father and a smile identical to Emily's, I cried, not out of sorrow, but because I knew we had made it through the unimaginable. The house that once suffocated with silence and suspicion was now filled with laughter, the smell of fresh-baked pastries, birdsong on the porch, and most importantly, no more buried secrets. One afternoon while I was watering the garden, Raymond walked outside with 2 glasses of iced lemonade, handing me one. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, eyes on the white rose bush sprouting fresh shoots. "There was a time I thought I'd never have peace like this again," I said. "But it turns out, if you're brave enough to face things, you can always start over." Raymond gently squeezed my hand. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not leaving me, for saving this family." I looked at him. I didn't save us. The truth did. And in that moment, I realized the most important thing. Not every battle needs shouting. Sometimes the strongest weapon is the quiet resilience of a woman who knows her worth. We didn't destroy anyone. We simply took back the authorship of our own story. 6 months after Vanessa left our lives, the letter from Phoenix remained etched in my memory. The photo of baby David with Tony's deep-set eyes and a tiny mouth curled in a smile sat in a small wooden frame on my bookshelf. No one asked why it was there. No one dared mention the name that once brought us so much pain. But to me, it was proof of one thing I still believed: even amidst chaos, something kind can still grow. Vanessa never contacted us again. I didn't expect her to. I only hoped she had truly started over, far from the shadows of the schemes she once created. I didn't forgive, but I didn't hold hatred either. I simply let go. Meanwhile, Evan slowly stepped out from under his own shadow. He attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings regularly. I never asked him what he shared in those rooms. I knew that was a personal journey. But I saw clearly he was becoming himself again, clear-minded, responsible, and most importantly, honest with himself. One of the most moving moments I witnessed was when Evan walked out to the garden, once the silent battleground between him and his father, and hugged Raymond tightly. "Thank you, Dad," Evan said without any lead-in. Raymond didn't reply. He just held his son close for a long time, and I knew in that moment something deep within them had been repaired. Evan met Emily at the town library where she worked. No matchmaking, no force, just 2 people each carrying their own scars who happened to cross paths during a talk on classical literature. When he brought her home to meet us, I saw it immediately. She was nothing like Vanessa. Not flashy, not demanding, not seeking attention. But there was a calming gentleness about her, like an autumn morning. "Evans told me about you," Emily said during her first dinner with us. "I think you're a very strong woman." I smiled. "You're mistaken. I'm just someone who knows when to stay silent and when to speak." They were married 6 months later, a simple, warm ceremony held right in our garden. I arranged the flowers, Raymond rebuilt the old wooden arch, and Evan, for the first time in years, smiled with his whole heart. The night before the wedding, Evan sat beside me in the kitchen where everything had once begun. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "if it weren't for you, I don't think I'd be standing here today." I placed my hand over his. "Son, I didn't lift you up. I just stood beside you when you decided to get back up." When Emily became pregnant, our home felt like a small spring had arrived. This time there were no doubts, no tests, no schemes, only love. Raymond and I picked out a room that used to be a reading nook, painted it soft cream, and added floral wall stickers I bought from a local craft store. A small maple crib sat by the window where sunlight streamed in every morning. The baby girl was born one early March morning during a light rain. Evan called immediately, his voice cracking with emotion. "Mom, she's beautiful." Dark eyes, soft curls, just like when she was a baby. Emily named her Lily. "Do you want to come right away?" I laughed as tears fell onto my hand. "Of course. I'm putting on my coat right now." When I held Lily for the first time, her tiny hand grasped my finger, and I knew the storm had truly passed. All the lies, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt had been replaced by something pure and honest, a family that had healed. Raymond stood behind me, resting his hand on my shoulder, eyes shimmering. "Grandma suits you well." I turned and smiled at him. "It's not my first time being a grandmother, but it's the first time it feels right." A week after Lily's birth, I received another letter again from Phoenix. Inside was a new photo of baby David now sitting up grinning at a blue teddy bear. On the back, in simple handwriting, David just got his first tooth. "Thank you for choosing kindness over punishment." Vanessa. I stared at the photo for a long time. I didn't plan to reply. Not because I was cold, but because I understood some answers live in silence. And sometimes forgiveness isn't in grand words, but in the choice not to make someone your eternal enemy. I placed David's photo next to Lily's. 2 children, 2 different stories, both born of imperfect beginnings. One day they may learn about each other, or maybe not, but I hoped they would both grow up surrounded by truth, love, and the chance to begin again. Sitting in the garden on an early summer afternoon, I watched the white roses in full bloom. Raymond was pruning nearby, Lily napped in her crib under the shade, and Evan worked on repairing the back fence. Emily came out with a tray of lemonade and sat beside me. I turned to my daughter-in-law and whispered, "Thank you for bringing light into this family." Emily smiled. "It's you who kept the flame alive. I just came at the right time to warm myself in its glow." I didn't respond. I simply looked up at the blue sky, let the breeze stir my silver hair, and for the first time in a long while felt truly at peace. 1 year after Vanessa left, 1 year after that dinner that brought every truth to light, 1 year filled with tears, healing, and rebirth, our home had finally returned to the true meaning of family. The backyard, once a silent witness to tension, lies, and mistrust, was now blooming with flowers. The white rose bushes Raymond had carefully tended through the winter had burst into full bloom beneath the early spring sun. Even the old apple tree, ravaged by pests last year, was sprouting fresh green shoots. And amid all that revival, something new was about to happen. Something I once thought I'd never live to see. Evan and Emily were holding Lily's baptism in our garden, and they had invited all their friends and neighbors. I stood in the upstairs bedroom wearing a soft olive green dress and fastening my mother's old brooch into my hair. Around my neck was the pearl necklace Raymond gave me on our 30th wedding anniversary, a piece I had locked away during the hardest years of our family's crisis. Now I wore it as a symbol. Everything can be mended as long as love and truth remain. From the bedroom window, I looked down into the backyard rows of chairs, arranged neatly white tablecloths fluttering in the gentle breeze, a buffet table filled with dishes that Emily, the neighbors, and I had prepared. A floral arch of white and purple roses stood in the center aisle where the local pastor would bless Lily. Raymond held our granddaughter in his arms, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. Evan was fixing the collar of his father's shirt, while Emily laughed with a friend who had just arrived. Watching that scene, my chest tightened. No one would have imagined that just a year ago this same garden had been where trust was shattered. But now it was filled with light, a light made from patience, wisdom, and unconditional love. As the ceremony began, I sat in the front row beside Raymond. Lily wore a white lace dress and a crown of tiny flowers resting quietly in her mother's arms. The pastor raised his hands and spoke blessings in a warm, solemn voice. May God grant this child the wisdom to discern right from wrong, a heart to love sincerely, and strength to stand tall in life's challenges. I'm not religious, but I believed in those blessings because I had witnessed this truth. Even those who stumble can rise again if someone reaches out at the right moment. After the ceremony, neighbors came to offer congratulations. An elderly woman said to me, "Mrs. Helen, you look like an old oak tree that stood through the storm, silent, unshaken, and now with spring returned, you're blooming." I laughed. I didn't think I could bloom at this age, but maybe I just forgot what spring felt like. Later, as most guests had left, I stayed to clean up under the porch. Emily came over and handed me a cup of hot tea. "There's something," she said. "I know it might make you uncomfortable, but I think I should tell you." I looked at her, slightly tilting my head. "Vanessa sent a letter." My heart skipped a beat. This time she didn't ask for anything, Emily continued. "Just a new photo of baby David. He looks adorable. And she wrote that it was because of you she didn't go through with the abortion at her lowest moment." I said nothing. Emily placed the photo on the table. A little boy about 1 year old playing with a wooden toy truck, his smile shining under the sunlight. On the back it read, "David turned 1 this month. He may not grow up in a perfect family, but he will be loved by a mother who's trying. Thank you, Mrs. Helen, for not discarding this child when you could have." I held the photo and looked at it for a long time. Raymond walked up behind me. "Do you want to keep it?" I nodded. "Yes, not because of her, but because of the boy." That night, as we lay in bed, Raymond held my hand. "Do you think you've won?" he asked. I gently shook my head. "There are no winners. We don't live to win. We live to not give up." Raymond chuckled softly and patted my hand. "If I could do it all over again, I'd still choose you, even if you scolded me just as harshly." I laughed. "And if I could live my life again, I'd still choose to stay silent at the right time and speak out when it mattered." I turned toward the nightstand where 2 framed photos sat, one of Lily, one of David. Neither of them was to blame for being born. And if there was one thing that let me hold my head high, it was this: I had protected both children from the bitterness of adults. I closed my eyes and let my breath drift with the breeze outside the porch. There was no more resentment in my heart, only gratitude for, after everything, I still had the chance to witness one final spring blossom in my soul. So my story has come to an end. It began with an arrogant whisper in my ear and ended with a truth that left the betrayer silent and walking away. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to seek cruel revenge. All I needed was to stay grounded, take each step steadily, and let the truth speak for itself. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where you were belittled, seen as weak or invisible in your own family, I hope this story reminds you of one thing: no one can strip you of your dignity unless you allow them to. If that message resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so we can continue to meet in stories where integrity, clarity, and self-love always have the final say. See you in the next story. And right now, I'll leave on the screen 2 of the most beloved videos on this channel, ones you won't want to miss. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. Wishing you a peaceful day, clear-headed enough to recognize your own worth, and strong enough to protect it, no matter what comes your way.